Good morning. My name is Jennifer D. Mudd, and I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, also known as MGA. We are a membership-based organization that provides services to help manufacturers build smart and lead strong, and to establish a pathway for future growth. Our services drive solutions that make manufacturing in Michigan the most competitive and prosperous in the nation. Our conversation this morning is for small manufacturers who are interested in diversifying their customer base and expanding their revenue stream. Doing business with the government is a great way to introduce a business to a new marketplace. Each year, the federal government purchases hundreds of billions of dollars in goods and services. The Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, PTACs, can help position small manufacturers to pursue these opportunities. Today, we are going to hear from one of the PTAC regional centers. Before I introduce our guests, I have just a few housekeeping items to share. We encourage questions and comments, so please type those questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll monitor those questions and make sure that our presenters have an opportunity to respond. Also, we are recording the conversation today to provide the content to manufacturers after this webinar. Now, let's introduce one of our presenters, Jasmine McKenney. She is a program director for the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which provides administration and direction of the Defense Logistics Agency and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, funded organizations that provide no-fee technical assistance to small businesses that are looking to begin or increase their footprint in government marketplace. Jasmine holds a bachelor's degree in communications from Howard University. She also holds professional certifications in contract management and government contracting from the George Washington University and certified procurement professional through the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. And Jasmine has a colleague with her today to talk about cybersecurity. We're going to let Jasmine introduce Maureen. So let's welcome Jasmine and Maureen.
Good morning, Jen. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the Manufacturing Growth Association for inviting us. I apologize, I can't see anything right now. My computer is on the fritz, so okay, let me try and restart sharing my screen. So I apologize for the brief technical issue, but we will be—
No problem.
All right, now I can see. And I said association and I meant alliance, so I apologize for that. But we are excited to be here to share a little bit of information with your community about government contracting. And so today we will call it Government Contracting for Manufacturers, Growing Your Business with Government Contracts. As Jen stated previously, we are a grant-funded organization. The PTAC is the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. There are over 90 PTAC centers throughout the United States. It is a Department of Defense program of record, and we are essentially here to provide free to low cost assistance. All of the assistance that is provided out of our Region 6 office here in the state of Michigan is at no cost to our clients. And that varies by center. There are actually 10 centers right here in the state of Michigan. Here we go. 10 centers right here in the state of Michigan that are available to provide services to your company. And those services include one-on-one business counseling to assist with government, all these things are related to government contracting. So any kind of troubleshooting that you might need with a contract that you might be a holder of or trying to figure out, price history reports, specifications and standards, training events and seminars. We all host, that's one of our goals. We all host a numerous amount throughout the year of events, meet the buyer type opportunities as well. We also offer a bid match system where we put in your company's capabilities, and we'll talk a little bit more about bid match a little bit later in the presentation, but it is free. We put your company's capabilities into our system, and it populates an email to you on a daily basis of those opportunities. Agency matches, and we also assist with solicitation review, proposal review, and proposal bid preparation. So we help you. The two things that we don't do, we do not tell you what to price something, but we can provide a price history report that would provide comparable opportunities and pricing. And then the other thing that we don't do is we do not write the proposal for you. So we are here to help you through that process and make sure that you are technically sound in what you submit to the government, but we are not able, unfortunately, to write those proposals. And I say unfortunately, because we really go the extra mile in terms of assisting our clients. So if you are looking for your local PTAC office, please visit ptacsofmichigan.org and you can find your local office there. All right, so to talk a little bit today about federal government procurement. So we do assist, let me put this out here, we do assist with state, local subcontracting as well. But for today, we're going to focus on federal contracting. It's all big. And so sometimes it can get overwhelming. So we were trying to think about what's the best way to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So if you are interested in state or local opportunities as it relates to government contracting, we will talk a little bit about subcontracting today though. Please feel free to contact one of the PTAC offices that's nearest you. And so the federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. The United States federal government. In addition to that, the Department of Defense is the largest purchaser within the federal government. So there are a lot of opportunities, and it ranges anywhere from pens and pencils to armored tanks and everything in between there. And so we like to think that generally speaking, if there's a company that comes to us, we can find an opportunity for them. Is very rarely, and it's often disappointing, not often, but it's disappointing when we can't help a company because generally speaking, we are able to help find the opportunities for our clients. That doesn't mean that you're awarded that opportunity, but we are able to find those opportunities. And so when we look at federal government procurement, there are what we call set-asides that are established by the government through the Code for Federal Regulations, CFR, that establishes the opportunity for small businesses and certain subcategories to engage with government contracting and have set-aside opportunities. So in the government world, it's called the rule of two. If the contracting officer can establish that there are at least two companies that can perform that work, that might be woman-owned, two woman-owned companies that could perform, or two hub zone companies, historically underutilized business zone companies, or two service disabled veteran-owned businesses that could do that, or two small businesses. They can set that opportunity aside for that category. So that's how set-asides happen. The government does their market research to establish that there are two. So two, rule of two. So when we look at federal government spend, we're looking at 23% is set aside for small businesses. That number is generally always met. The federal government never, I don't think, has in the last 30 to 40 years, has missed making that goal. So small business goal, they make that. 23% of all government contracting is spent with small businesses. 5%, and all of this is trickle down. So if you think about these percentages and what this looks like, and if your company is a small business, if your company is a woman-owned business, and a hub zone business, or if you're located in a hub zone and you're interested in those certifications, our offices are are available to assist you with getting the appropriate certification that will, with the exception of small business, and I'll explain that in just a second, we're able to assist you with becoming a certified woman-owned small business, or certified through the SBA HubZone business, or a certified service disabled veteran-owned small business. We're capable, and that's one of the things that we do pretty regularly for our clients to help them, be able to leverage those opportunities for greater contracting opportunities for that company. And so and when you think of these percentages, think of total spend. So if the government's spending $600 billion, it's 23% of that 600 billion. It's 5% of that 600 billion. When I was a baby bird in contracting, I used to think it was 23 minus 5 minus 3. So then that was what was left. But no, it's actually 5% of all contracting. So that $600 billion figure that I threw out there, 5% of that $600 billion goes to or is set aside for woman-owned small businesses. And so it is our job at the PTAC to help you all compete. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to do your research. And to be very honest, I am not a slide person. So just let me put it out there. I might get ahead of myself on my slides, or or something might happen. So we might get to a slide and it's like, oh, you already talked about that, but that's okay. Hang in there with me. So the one thing is that you want to do your research, and PTAC is here to assist you. I do not want to make it seem like a commercial for PTAC at all. We're not selling anything. Our services are your tax dollars at work. And so I just want to make sure that you guys understand that our offices are here to provide that support to you as you try and navigate this new terrain, or if you're already in contracting, how we can help you expand that footprint in the government marketplace. And so the first thing that you want to do is you want to figure out what your classification codes are. So there are NAICS codes, which are the North American Industrial Classification Codes, as well as federal supply codes, which you might hear also called product service codes, as well as NIGP codes, which the NIGP codes are used generally for state and local opportunities. When we talk about manufacturers for NAICS codes, those NAICS codes are found in the 31 to 33. So the NAICS code will begin with 31, 32, or 33, and then it will extend out from there. There are numerous amounts of NAICS codes. You can definitely have multiples, but you definitely have a primary NAICS code that will help identify your small business status as well. I've already discussed federal supply codes. So those could also be, you might see PSC, FSC/FSC codes, and those can be found on acquisition.gov. There is a manual there to help you identify what your FSC codes are. And the other thing that I will say about FSC and PSC codes is that's different from our NAICS codes that you might be more familiar with, is that those codes are a little bit more specific about what it is that you do. So they help to define a little bit further what it is that you do and help us to find those opportunities for you to bid on. So we are available. Federal supply codes and product service codes are used only by the federal government. So you won't see them. It won't be something that you've used somewhere else unless you're working with a government prime. But the government uses those to describe the products, services, and research and development that is purchased by the government. So like I said, those are a little bit more tailored than the NAICS codes, which are more broad. The second thing that you want to do when we're talking about research is finding out what agencies are buying the most of what you sell. For us, it's really, I don't want to say it's really easy, but a lot of times, a lot of our manufacturers just fall into the space of looking for opportunities with the Defense Logistics Agency, which provides, they purchase for all of the Department of Defense. So a lot of this conversation is going to be tailored at that. That's not to say that there are not other opportunities. We can help you identify those. The first thing that we have to do is we have to figure out what those NAICS codes are, what those FSC codes are, and then we can use that information to look and see on usaspending.gov or the Federal Procurement Data System, which is now located on sam.gov. We can identify who's buying what you sell just by looking at that NAICS code, plopping that NAICS code into one of those sites and seeing where are the opportunities, what is the historic, where is the forecast, so that you can position yourself. The other thing that you want to do is locations. So sometimes this doesn't matter. It depends on exactly what it is that you're providing. The government, thank goodness, well, I should say DLA, does pay for shipping. So that makes it a little bit easier when you're thinking about your pricing margins for for selling to the government, that you don't have to think, well, I probably don't want to sell to California if I'm selling armored tank and I have to actually get it there if the government is picking up that cost of shipping. So, but you still want to know what location is primarily buying what you sell, because you also want the opportunity to market yourself directly to those buyers, those end users that are in that agency. So knowing exactly, okay, so we're talking about DLA. DLA has, I believe, 8 installations. One is right very close to us in Columbus, Ohio. And they do a large amount of purchasing out of that location, but then they also have a location in Philadelphia. And so we just want to make sure that we know the right location so that you can market yourself as well. Let's see, number 4, who is your competition? So, there's that saying, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And so knowing your competition will help you be a sharper contractor. Not only will it help you in terms of determining, hey, if my competition has figured this out, they're providing a public blueprint. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here, but they're providing a public blueprint for you because all of this information is public. So you'll be able to know, who have they sold to? What has it sold for? What did they actually sell to them? Especially if you've already identified who that competition is, we're able to also help you identify the competition. Once we find out what your NAICS codes are and have a clearer understanding about what the products are and what the capacity is in your manufacturing facility, it can help us kind of say, oh, okay, it sounds like, this might be a competitor of yours, or this might be. The other thing about a competitor is that also could be a teaming partner, or it could also be someone that you do subcontracting to as you're trying to get your feet wet in government contracting. So it's not always that this person is the competition as we would think of it in athletics, and I want to beat that person. Sometimes that person is going to be a part of your team, or could be a part of your team, or you could be part of theirs. And so that helps you get a really clear understanding. So we want to know who the competition is for several different reasons. We want to know because they provided that blueprint. So who are they selling to? You also probably know, most of my clients do, they will be able to tell me their competition, what the competition's weakness is, and what they present as the differentiator that makes them better. So if you know the competition's weakness and you know who they have contracts with, you can go directly to those people and say, hey, now whatever, X, Y, and Z, and we actually have a solution to that. So it makes you that much sharper. The other thing that you want to do is, once you've done all this research, you want to decide, am I going to go direct or am I going to go indirect? And so a lot of our companies, they will go through the process, a lot of different things. And here's the thing, there's nothing that you're going to do in this process that will then, when you get to, am I going direct or am I going indirect, that's going to make you change anything. Like everything that you've done has built to this. So there's not, oh, I wasted my time getting that certification, or I wasted my time doing that research. all of that is going to be helpful in creating that marketing plan or creating that plan of attack in terms of how you're going to acquire government contracts. And so when we talk about direct versus indirect, we're talking about, do you want to be direct to the government or do you want to be a subcontractor? But you still need to know all these things because flow down clauses and large primes have the same requirements for small business set asides as well as the federal government. So we want to make sure that you have a plan for that. Sometimes it's easier to get in on a subcontract as you're trying to get your feet wet than it is to go directly to the government because you don't necessarily have the past performance. That's not always true though. So, you know, it's really up to you in terms of what it is that you want to do and how you want to pivot in that space.
Jasmine, a quick question on indirect. The question is, how does a manufacturer know who's submitting primes to be a subcontractor to that prime? So if a manufacturer is saying, you know, I want to engage in government contracting, I want to get my feet wet as a indirect supporter, how does that matchmaking happen?
So there's a couple of different ways that could happen. The one way is that we have a list of DoD primes that we can definitely give to you. Or, you know, a lot of companies are like, oh, I want to work with General Dynamics Land Systems, or I want to work with Boeing. And so they have some kind of inkling in terms of where they might fit. And then we can help you get into those supplier diversity portals. We can help you with all of those things because you still might need to be registered in the system for award management. So there are different things. Maureen is going to talk about cybersecurity. And so that's big with our prime contractors as well. And so we want to make sure that as you engage with those opportunities that you have done all the things that you need to do in order to rise to the top, because we know that going in and putting your information in a portal is often not all it takes to get that contract, right? So it's going to, recently we had a doing business with Boeing where we also had, it was a statewide event, and we also had a little bit of matchmaking. So we didn't have, it wasn't huge. We only had, I think, 60 slots. So there weren't a lot of opportunities, but it was good for those that were able to secure those meetings. So looking for opportunities like that, we can help you connect with that. The other thing is the DoD, Department of Defense, publishes a list of who was awarded contracts. And so one thing you can do is you can chase that list to see, who was awarded a contract. Now, a lot of times you're thinking about that, then you're thinking about the procurement after it's been awarded. And so there is a large opportunity, there's a large chance that some of those opportunities have already, you know, been, I don't want to say promised, but essentially they've built their team, right? And so how do you get ahead of that? Well, the federal government does require large primes when they, like there's a large project that is going to come out of, I'll use a real life example. There's a large project that is many years in the making, and I don't know where it stands right now, but it's in the SULOCs. And so the prime contractors on that opportunity are right now, they've been identified. So what they're trying to do, and they've hosted, I think, 2 different, at this point, at least 2 like industry days to invite companies in. All of that information is kept public. Most of the time, those industry days are posted on the System for Award Management. If there's something that you're watching and you're like, hey, I want to know more about this, we can help you, we can help connect you or try and figure out and navigate those waters, because it might depend on procurement to procurement. But generally, you can get ahead of it by looking at who those prime contractors are, what opportunities might you have with them, and making sure you're in their supplier portals before they they get awarded, and then asking them for a capabilities briefing, right? So it's not just enough to just throw your information into this portal and expect magic to happen there, although it happens too. But also you want to circle back around and find out, who do I need to talk to that I can do a capabilities briefing with, so that they can know a little bit more about my company, so that I can put myself in front of them, tell them why I'm passionate about this opportunity, or tell them why I might be a good fit for them. All right. So we've already talked about identifying NAICS codes, but the first thing, once you've done all this research, now you've done the research, you got your NAICS codes, you got your product service codes / federal supply codes, now you're going to get registered. And so where you're registering is you're registering in the system for award management, but there's a couple of things that you need to have on hand in order to register. The one thing is, you've already identified the NAICS codes, so you got those on hand. You want to make sure you have those. And then the other thing is, if you do not already have, you need to obtain a unique identifier. So this used to be called a DUNS number. There's a transition happening, and that one thing you'll learn as you're getting started in government contracting, as you begin this process, is that nothing stays the same in the government contracting world. And so there's always an evolution to create better systems and to maximize systems and things like that. So as a part of that, there is a change that is on the horizon for the unique identifiers. So we're calling them unique identifiers instead of calling them DUNS numbers. But right now, the DUNS number, or your DUNS number, is the unique identifier. At some point that will shift, but you won't have to worry about that if you're already registered in SAM. So you need to go, if you do not have a Duns and Bradstreet number, if you don't know if you have one. If you've been in business for a while, you probably have one, whether you know it or not. But if you do not have a DUNS number, if you're trying to find out what your DUNS number is, that is the website that you would go to either find your DUNS number, or to create one in order to be able to move to the next step of registering in the system for award management. This is number one. There is no cost for registering in SAM. I have to say that. No cost. None. Zero. We can help you register. We could do a screen share meeting just like this to help you register in the system for award management. Sometimes the questions that they ask can be a little bit tricky, and they ask them a lot of times different ways to make sure that you're telling the truth, because you are, once you do all these things, you're going to be eligible to possibly view technical data packages and different things like that that are very sensitive to our country's national security. And so, of course, we definitely want to protect these things and know who is accessing those documents. And so we can help with the SAM registration. Never pay anyone to help you with the SAM registration. If you hear a colleague of yours that owns a company that says that they're going to pay someone, tell them no. Call their local PTAC office. We're here to help with that. There's no need to pay anyone to do something that can be done for free. And so registering in SAM, and then the next step is, as a part of your SAM registration, there's something called the Dynamic Small Business Search. The Dynamic Small Business Search is a really cool tool because you can use that, and we use it to help find your competition, see what their NAICS codes are, so you can kind of see what your NAICS code should be. But also contracting officers use that when they're trying to do their market research. It's one of the tools that they use in doing market research to identify that rule of two. Are there two? And so we want to make sure that the information that we have in there for you is appropriately represented. And so we also do that registration as a part of the SAM registration. Alrighty, so everyone's always interested. So you probably don't want to look at opportunities. I mean, you can until you are registered in SAM, but once you've registered in SAM, knowing where to find the opportunities is extremely important. And there's two main sites where you would be going to find opportunities. And one would be SAM.gov. It used to be called the Federal Business Opportunities, FBO.gov. So some might be more familiar with that. It recently merged. Maybe that wasn't recently, that was 2019. Where did all the time go? But in the fall of 2019, it merged onto SAM.gov. So there's all these different sites that have merged over the last 3 years now onto SAM.gov. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop now where you can go and you can find opportunities, you can register your company, you can look at historical pricing information, all on one site, and that site is SAM.gov. We can help you navigate that and learn how to search for opportunities and you can set up your profile in there. Once you, well, actually you can set up a profile without even having a SAM registration, but once you do, you can also log in and set up that where it'll send opportunities to you when it uses certain keywords or certain NAICS codes based on what you've put in there. The other site that probably all of Maureen's clients use daily is the DLA, Internet Bid Board System, more commonly referred to as DIBS. DIBS is a site you can search on DIBS without having, without logging in, but you can't view the technical data. So for our manufacturing clients, it really doesn't make any sense not to be logged in because they need that opportunity to be able to view the technical data and specifications to really be able to understand whether they can go after an opportunity or whether they can't. And so there's something called C folders. So you would need to gain C folders access for viewing those specifications and technical data packages. We also, I don't want to get ahead of myself. All right, I didn't. All right, so the other things that you want to consider are MIL standards. So those are military standards and specifications. To begin to familiarize yourself with those in order to make sure that you're compliant. MIL Standard 129 outlines marking and shipping label requirements. This website that I've listed here, everyspec.com, is a free site that has quite a few MIL standards that are listed there. The other thing that you want to consider is packaging standards. So my first client that I worked with from registration all the way to getting his first award. So he's a one-man machine shop and he's bidding on DIBS, and we got him his JCP certification, which we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. We got him set up in SAM. He's ready to go. He's playing on DIBS. I go for, just to meet with him as we would regularly do. And he says, Jasmine, I was awarded a contract. Like, wait a minute, what? And he's like, yeah, I put in a quote on DIBS and I won the contract. And so I need to figure out this packaging piece. So I'm like, okay, you didn't think about this before you bid the contract? Okay, that's fine. But he was so excited to be bidding and to look for these opportunities because he was really hungry for government contracting. And so when I tell you we had all these specifications printed out, I went to his office and we're trying to figure it out. And then in the end, he ended up hiring a packaging house. So that's why I say that's one of the things to consider. Are you going to do the packaging in-house? Do you have that capability? Do you know what the government is asking for? Or are you looking for someone to outsource the packaging? And there are people that specialize specifically in government packaging and can make your life a lot easier. But you want to know those things ahead of time so that you can include those costs in your bid. The other thing is DFARS and FARS clauses. Nobody wants to talk about DFARS and FARS clauses because that's the federal acquisition regulations and then the defense federal acquisition regulations. They're not that exciting to talk about, but they are included in your SAM profile. They are included in every solicitation that the government puts out. And so you want to know what you're signing on the dotted line and saying, yes, I will do this. The other thing about DFARS and FARS clauses is they will help you, they will answer a lot of the questions that you might have about a specific requirement, or when am I going to get paid, or how am I going to get paid? They answer those questions. So it's very good to know them. I'm not saying go and read up all of the clauses because it'll put you to sleep at night. But what I am saying is that when you register in SAM, read those clauses. When you are bidding on that opportunity and it has those DFARS clauses or those FAR clauses listed at the end, and then you're supposed to sign on the dotted line, read those clauses, read through those clauses, please do. Because you never know what you're committing yourself to. And a lot of people think, oh, it's nothing. It could be a big something. So you want to know what you're saying that you will do. DFARS and FARS clauses can be found on acquisition.gov. So acquisition.gov is a great resource for government contractors. And then the last thing to consider, not the last thing, but the last thing on this list is certifications and compliances. And so I talked about JCP certification. So that's the joint certification. Let's see. JCP is the Joint Certification Program. It is for US and Canadian companies. And it was established in 1985 to allow the United States and Canadian contractors to apply to access Department of Defense and Department of National Defense unclassified and export controlled technical data / critical technology on an equally favorable basis in accordance with DODI 5320.25. So essentially, this was established to make sure that the government, both the US and the Canadian government, knew who was accessing those technical data packages that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And so that is one thing that you need to have in order to view most, if not all, the technical data that is on DIPS to be able to see, is this something that I could do? The other thing to consider is, do I need ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulation certification, or do I need to be compliant in that? And so we can help you figure those things out. There's a munitions list. So if there's different things that you're bidding on that would fall onto that list, we need to make sure, because you might need to have ITAR compliance. We see compliance a lot more with ITAR than certification necessarily. So we want to make sure that you're doing everything that you're saying that you're supposed to, because that is also probably going to be listed in one of those DFARS or FAR clauses. And it's like, oh, they didn't tell me I needed to be ITAR compliant. Actually, they did. It was in that DFARS clause. So, and then the last certification or compliance that I have listed here is where my good friend Maureen Miller is going to come in and bless the audience with her knowledge on this area, but it's cybersecurity. And so the federal government, I think it was in 2016 or 2017, they required that companies be NIST compliant, NIST 800-171. So there's a list of all these controls, and they asked clients to be, or contractors to be compliant. Then they said, we're not getting what we need. So they put a little bit more teeth behind it, and we're seeing something called CMMC. the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which is kind of an evolution of the NIST 800-171 previous requirement. And now we see this certification happening where you have more teeth, where the government is saying, like, in order to do business with the Department of Defense at this point, and as it goes Department of Defense, so does the rest of the federal government, that this certification is going to be necessary. And so Maureen is going to talk a little bit more about that. Maureen is a senior procurement counselor at the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance. We recently had a name change, don't judge me. And so she is going to talk a little bit about this. She's our in-house cyber expert. So we go to her when we have a client that has cyber needs or has questions about cyber, and she helps us to help them, or she'll talk directly to them. So Maureen.
Thanks, Jasmine. So I just want to clarify, I am the in-house cybersecurity expert, but I do not have a background in IT. I have made it my goal to understand what cybersecurity means and be able to explain it to other people who are also not IT background, do not have strong IT backgrounds. So we first have to understand that cybersecurity is a foundation to acquisition. Things have changed so much, and like Jasmine said earlier, they continue to evolve, especially in government contracting, and cybersecurity has come to the forefront as something that is absolutely a foundation to it. You must protect information that the government shares with you and have a plan of attack or a plan of action in order to know if there's a breach and how to handle it. So it's the foundation to acquisition, but with the exception of micro purchases, which are purchases that are under $10,000, which formerly it was $3,500. So that micro purchase threshold also changes. And it's also micro purchases as well as COTS, or commercial off-the-shelf items. So anything that can be purchased or sold or leased or licensed to the general public. So I'm going to explain a little bit, and you probably have already gotten an understanding of this. When it comes to government contracting, there's a lot of acronyms. So I'm going to try to make sure that I explain when we use those acronyms what they are. So we'll first start out with NIST. NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So the NIST 800-171 compliance was set up by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. CMMC is a Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And then the interim DFARS, which is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Rule, was set up to help assist between becoming NIST compliant and getting CMMC certified. So let me just break down a little bit these three regulations. Waiting for my notes to pop up here. Here we go. So federal contractors and their subcontractors are required by the federal government to protect FCI, or federal contracting information. So that's anything related to a federal contract, as well as CUI, which stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. So CUI can be drawings, blueprints, any technical data. And they have to protect this from outside threats, outside of your company. So even if you work for a tier 1 prime, like General Dynamics, they flow that contract clause down to you. So they have to be NIST 800-171 compliant or cybersecurity compliant, and so do you, because you're their subcontractor. And if you hire somebody as a subcontractor underneath you to help you with that contract, that subcontractor also has to be NIST 800-171 compliant. So it can't just be one person and then you hire whoever you want. You have to make sure that everybody understands that they have to follow these compliance rules. That's kind of the rule of the flow down. So let's break down NIST 800-171. It's a codification of the requirements that any non-federal computer system must follow in order to store, process, or transmit controlled unclassified information. So that word, controlled unclassified information, is quite a mouthful. So from here on out, I'm going to explain it as CUI, and that's the acronym that they use to describe that. So they have to be able to protect this information, as well as provide security protection for their own systems. So this rule through NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology, came out in December 31st of 2017. And NIST 800-171 standardizes how the federal agencies define CUI, or the data that's private and sensitive, but not classified per federal law. So that's why they call it unclassified information, controlled unclassified information. NIST 800-171 controls apply to federal government contractors and their subcontractors. So if you or another company you work with has a contract with a federal agency, you must be compliant with this policy. Federal agencies may include specific requirements in their contracts. However, if you don't have those clauses in the contract, that won't stop NIST 800-171 from applying to your agreement, especially if you're a manufacturer. So NIST 800-171 provides a list of 14 controls. And in the cybersecurity realm, they call controls mean like systems or regulations. So in the beginning, I was confused about what they meant by controls, but they call it controls, and it means things like access control. Who has access, and are they supposed to have access to this information? Awareness and training. Did you train your staff about what CUI is? Audit and accountability. Do you know who is accessing that CUI? Configuration management. Are you following guidelines to maintain secure configurations and manage changes within your system? Incident response. What happens when there's a data breach? Maintenance to configuration management. Media protection. How are you doing backups? External. How do you handle external drives and retired equipment? So they all break down to pretty basic cyber security, cyber compliance, cyber cleanliness. There's also physical protection, personnel security. Is your staff trained to identify insider threats? Risk assessment. Have you done a risk assessment on your system? Security assessment. How do you verify your security procedures, and are they in place? System and communication protection. And then the final one is system and information integrity. Is the process to address new vulnerabilities in your system defined? So we know that there's constantly phishing scams and different ways that these hackers try to get into systems. So there has to be a process to address new ones as they come up. So some of the benefits of implementing cybersecurity controls include risk management. You can reduce the risk of data breaches. You can protect not only the government information, but your employees' information, personal information, your own personal information. You reduce your risk from insider threats, and you reduce your risk from outsider threats. It's a best practice for data access policies. When I started to learn about this stuff, I realized, especially since we've been working from home so much, that these controls, these 14 controls, really make sense for anybody to have on any of their computer systems. Let's see. So looking back at our slide, there's 3 things under NIST 800-171 compliance that you need to be aware of. First is a gap analysis. A gap analysis is a cybersecurity system assessment, and it determines the differences between your current system and the ideal state of information that you need to have within your organization. It helps determine the steps required to reach your ideal cybersecurity posture. The next one is a POAM. And this is another one of those acronyms. So POAM stands for a plan of action and milestones. It's a plan that describes specific measures that you need to take to correct deficiencies found during your gap analysis, your security control assessment. So when you do this gap analysis, it doesn't mean you have to go out tomorrow and spend $10,000 to bring your system all the way up. You set up this plan of action and milestones to kind of systematically break down where you're at, where you need to be, and how to get there. The POEM should identify the tasks needed to correct the deficiency and the resources required to make the plan work and a timeline to complete them. The final thing is the SSP, or your System Security Plan. For the purposes of NIST 800-171 and CUI requirements, the SSP includes the necessary information about each system in your environment that processes, stores, and transmits that CUI. So they came out with NIST 800-171. They determined that everybody, especially they'd start with manufacturers, they needed to be compliant. And you had a little check that said, yes, I'm compliant. Well, the government did an audit and determined that 90% of the companies that checked that little box actually weren't compliant. They had said they were compliant, but never followed through on that POEM. So the government determined that they needed to come out with a certification, but not just any certification. They wanted it to be very specialized and designed to provide increased assurance that you as a contractor can adequately protect sensitive unclassified information and controlled unclassified information. So both the contracting information as well as the CUI. And so they developed this CMMC and they started working on the controls, and COVID hit. So there was a little bit of a gap on when they were going to require companies to become cybersecurity compliant. So they came up with the interim DFARS rule, and that took place last December. There's 3 levels on the CMMC. So between the time that they decided to develop a cybersecurity maturity model certification and now when it's starting to roll out, they determined there was going to be different levels. It wasn't just one certification covers everybody. So level 1 is just basic security. There's 119 practices. And if you're NIST 800-171 compliant, you're basically at level 1. You'll be able to test into level 1 with no problems. Level 3 is an additional 17 practices that you have to have in place on top of the 119. And level 3 is basically where we're finding that our manufacturers and those providing to the supply chain are going to be at. So if you're NIST 800 compliant, there's only 17 additional practices that you're going to have to add into that system. And then level 5 is advanced progressive security. There's 171 practices total, and they're very extensive. These are your big primes. So they determined that because this was starting to take a little bit of time, that they would start with the certification at those companies that were at level 5, because there were obviously fewer of them. And they actually started to add CMMC requirements into solicitations as early as the beginning of this year. And those select contracts were for those primes that obviously already had the level 5 or were in the process of getting the level 5 CMMC security. But in the meantime, they needed something to determine that those contractors that had selected the little box that said that they were NIST compliant were actually compliant. So they came out with the interim DFARS rule. And they're requiring that a manufacturer has a self-assessment score based on their gap analysis and their POEM and SSP, and that they enter this self-assessment score into a system called Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS. And SPRS is part of a system called PIEE, and it's similar to what SAM did. It's got multiple portals in it. And one of them is your past performance as well as invoicing. So it's located in more of a centralized portal. The biggest difference between the interim rule and NIST compliance is in NIST compliance, you have a POAM, a plan of action and milestones. When it comes to CMMC, there will be 0 POAM allowed. So that's why you need to start now, get your gap analysis, set up a POAM, so that by the time you are required to take your CMMC certification, you will be 100% compliant, because when they set up this when you take the self-assessment score that you have to enter now, you take 171 and you take deductions for each practice that you don't have in place. So there are actually scores that can be in the negative number. If you're at NIST 800-171 compliance, theoretically, you should be at the higher scale. Now, they tell us that the score, the actual number score, matters less than the fact that you're registered in SPRS. So DLA requires, in order to be able to view CUI, or controlled unclassified information, that you must have a JCP, or the be a part of the joint certification program. In order to be awarded a JCP, you must be NIST 800-171 compliant, as well as have a risk assessment score entered into SPRS. So that kind of determines if you are a manufacturer and you need to see technical data. This is a certification and a step that you're actually going to have to provide. Now, if you're a lawn care provider, or you do janitorial work, don't think it doesn't apply to you, because by 2025, anybody who does any type of contracting with the federal government will be required to be at least level 1, have basic security, CMMC, which means they must be NIST 800-171 compliant. So I like to tell my clients, look at it now. Maybe you're not a manufacturer and you think it doesn't apply to you, but looking at it now, getting it ready ahead of time can save you scurrying around at the end and applying for it that way. And then this is just a list of resources for small governments that can help you with NIST 800-171 compliance, as well as CMMC. The first one is the Defense Cybersecurity Assurance Program, or DCAP, and it's through the Economic Growth through University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. The contact person is Stephanie Ludwig. This is a grant-funded program that can refund up to 80% of the cost of becoming compliant. And they also assist you with being prepared for CMMC. So if you're a manufacturer and you know you're going to have to be level 3 certified, they can help you get NIST compliant, as well as prepare for those additional 17 controls. Because it's grant funded, sometimes they run out of funding, sometimes they get additional funding. So if they tell you they're out of funding, it doesn't mean that you're done. You can't use this program. They do get additional program funding occasionally. And so I always recommend manufacturers reach out to them first. If they have funding, they'll get you set up into their program and determine whether or not you're a good candidate. The second one is the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. And we have the information here. They can help you with implementation assistance. And then Michigan Defense Center Cyber Smart program has also assistance with getting that gap analysis. And I'll turn it over to Jasmine from here. You're on mute.
Thanks, Maureen. There's so much to this cybersecurity stuff, and we could go on and on about it. And the good thing is that there are a lot of resources. So please, we are going to make this presentation available. Please use the resources that are available to help get your company into compliance. And then really quickly to wrap up, we've already discussed that PTAC has a bid match system. So I highly recommend that if you're looking for opportunities that you utilize that system. And then obviously we also have our bid proposal support that we assist with our companies. And so your next step would be contacting your local PTAC to see how they can assist you further. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much, Jasmine and Maureen. The content was fabulous. I think it was spot on for what the Manufacturing Growth Alliance is hearing out in the ecosystem, in the manufacturing arena, as far as how do we engage with government contracting, what are the resources, and of course the cybersecurity component. I think it, Jasmine, I think it was in 2017. I think you were saying 16, 17, I think it was 17, where some of these requirements, we were seeing some of these cybersecurity requirements surface. So again, I want to thank both of you, Jasmine and Maureen, for talking with us today. The information you provided is very helpful for those watching. PTAC organizations are an exceptional resource for manufacturers, especially if you're looking to engage in new markets of government contracting at the federal, state, local level. Also for our participants, we will send out the link to this recording as well as the slide deck, and feel free to share the information with anyone on your team. Also, we'll be providing you with Jasmine's contact information, so you can reach out to her directly if you have questions. So thank you again, and we are going to close out our conversation today. All right, thank you so much.